Welcome to Culture and Society in Medieval Japan and China, 800s to 1400s. This is Melinda Klein. During the 6 centuries between 800 and 1400, East Asia was the most advanced region in the world. At least this is what Marco Polo wrote when he got there. When this 13th century Venetian traveler arrived in China, it was ruled by a foreign power, the Mongols, a nomadic people from Central Asia who had overthrown the Song dynasty and assumed control of the Chinese Empire. Geography amounts for many of the historical differences between Chinese and Japanese society and culture. China is a continental civilization. Japan is an island country encompassing 146,000 square miles, approximately the size of Montana. Like the United States, the climate is temperate. During the Middle Ages, China had built an effective centralized bureaucracy staffed with civilian scholar officials. Regional military governors and their supporters were replaced by central appointed officials. This system of civilian rule led to a greater concentration of power in the emperor and his palace, a bureaucracy that had been achieved in previous dynasties. The 300 years of the Song dynasty came to an end by 1279 with the arrival of the Mongols. The famine of the 1340s, combined with the inability of Mongol administrators to resolve internal disorder, led to rioting and ultimately defeat of the Mongols by 1369. This led the way for the foundation of the Ming dynasty that would rule China until 1644. The vast majority of Chinese lived off the land and centered their living in village communities ranging in size from several dozen family farms to several thousand. While there were roads to the outside world, the average village farmer ventured only short distances, oftentimes only a few miles, in his or her whole life since birth. In medieval Japan, the government structure, economy, and society, experiences, and history were different. While both nations were based on agriculture, China experienced an industrial revolution by the 9th century, and Japan was a feudal society with family dynasties fighting one another for power. Ultimately, the Emperor of Japan would be a figurehead. The real power in Japan that would evolve would belong to the most powerful military figure, the shogun. Japan's medieval era was characterized by the emergence of a ruling class of warriors, the samurai. This is feudal Japan. Under Japanese rulership, military drafts had been controlled by the government, and military affairs had been carried out by local ruling families. Thus, localized rule developed. In time, local landed families became a regional source of military strength. Heads of great and noble families became known as daimyo, who controlled and extended areas of land typical like kingdoms and paid no taxes to the government. This provincial upper class was transformed into a new military elite based on the ideas of the bushi, warrior, or samurai, literally meaning one who serves. A Chinese industrial revolution resulted in high output of iron implements. This iron was used to mass-produce plows, hammers, needles, pens, cymbals for musical instruments, along with other routine items for the indigenous mass market consumption and for trade with the outside world, which was also expanding at this point. Commerce was slow to develop. In ancient times, a class of artisans comprised of weavers, carpenters, and iron workers, but trade was relatively a local enterprise. Between the 1100s and 1300s, trades and commerce increased. Large towns held markets 3 times a month. Local economies, on more than a regular basis, began to trade not only between Japan and China, and also with Korea. In China, this official adoption of Confucianism led not only to a civil service nomination system, but also the compulsory knowledge of Confucian classics of candidates for the imperial bureaucracy, a requirement that lasted up to the establishment of the Republic of China in 1911. Daily life in feudal Japan for the common people changed little over time. The social structure was hierarchical, a vertical structure of power and position in which farmers and craftsmen were close to the bottom of society, only rising above common laborers. One of the first descriptions of daily life was the cultivation of rice, a Japanese staple. Like medieval Europe during this time, medieval Japan was largely an agricultural society. The medieval Empire of Japan expanded westward, making possible for reasonably secure caravan traffic across Central Asia, though this area was renowned for bandit raids. Japan began to develop patterns of trade and manufacturing in growing urban centers. Intra-regional trade was transported by horse-drawn cart or by boats on rivers or along the coast. For Japan during the Middle Ages, foreign trade consisted mainly with Korea and China, which began around the 11th century. Trade was usually bartered for other products until the Chinese introduced the use of metal coins as monetary exchange. Yes, China had not only a monopoly on tea, but also on silk production. The art and mystery behind silk production was carefully handed down from one generation to the next, and was a national secret. Buddhist priests returning from China advocated tea drinking had enhanced religious meditation, and tea drinking was introduced to Japan. The Japanese elevated tea drinking to an art form with the creation of the Japanese tea ceremony. The earliest Chinese books appeared in the 800s. The Chinese would in time create movable type in which long scrolls developed, some 16 feet in length. Painting flourished in China from the ancient period and through the medieval era. Painting may have been created on silk cloth or paper. They contained a highly technical use of color shades and refinement that was similar to Persian and Indian works. The Tale of Genji is sometimes called the world's first novel. It remains a classical piece of literature for Japan, an entertaining read for women of the aristocracy, and has many elements found in a modern novel. A central character and a very large number of major and minor characters, a sequence of events happened over a period of time covering the central character's lifetime and beyond. This is a tragic love story, making it a very popular read.